I recently talked about regular gyrocopters, so let's take a minute to talk about Brimstone guns. So, main difference here, we've got, of course, Way versus Solitude and You, Dwarfs versus Beastmen, but yeah, back to these guys. The main difference being, of course, Brimstone guns are the anti-large version, whereas the steam guns, the regular gyros, are very much anti-infantry. No explosion to speak of here, instead they just do good armor-piercing damage with a little 15 bonus versus large as well. Pretty good stuff. Other than that, there's, same gyrocopters before, 2 charges of bombs, and so forth. We're going to be doing a little bit of skirmishing here. We've got 4 Brimstone guns up against 3 Harpies in the sky, on the ground, a bunch of Dwarf Warriors, we've got Miners with charges, and some Thunderers as well. Rune Lord leading the way. For the Beastmen, we've got 3 Minotaurs unshielded, which is an interesting choice. A couple of Bestigor Herd, very good here. Spearman Herd, a bunch of Ungor Raiders, Ogre the Shadow Gave, and a Brimstone Lord of Shadows, Enfeebling Foe, and Penumbral Pendulum there. You can see right off the bat, the Harpies. It's got an interesting interaction here. They're fast enough to catch Brimstone guns. Brimstone guns 6 melee defense. They'll definitely take damage from the 44 weapon strength of Harpies, but the Thunders can potentially shoot up in the sky to help screen out, which is kind of the ideal thing here, so they are doing that. Brimstone guns kind of pulling back, although they already have taken a little bit of damage, at least in one case. The infantry fight now getting underway. Ungors are going to get exploded by blasting charges, but definitely better the Ungors than the Bestigor, who are able to get in combat here over on the side to get their full charge. Less charges on them. They still take some damage from the charges, but the Harpies now come and tie up one of these Brimstone guns. The other one's sitting back, and along with the handguns here, the Thunderers that is, firing in at the Minotaurs. Some nice Dowie combined arms pressure. And Brimstone guns will be contributing quite nicely to this little engagement. Spawn, summon in the back line, starting to pressure. The Thunderers, likewise, these Harpies are pressuring once again. Actually get a hold of this unit of gyros pretty convincingly. Get a nice little surround. Some fire up in the air from the Thunderers, but since they're kind of close, it's a little bit hard for them to actually shoot. But they do take down a few there. One of the gyros does go down, though. A little bit of an unfortunate situation. Meanwhile, the Rune Lord just getting absolutely bullied in the center as the Spawn and Minotaurs push through, broken up some of the Dwarf Warriors and Miners with charges and everything. Yeah, you can see some of the Dwarf Warriors and the units collapsing on this flank here, as the center is very much broken, but of course, without Harpies to take them down, the gyros are relatively safe up in the air. They can just keep firing their Brimstones, big old lumps of rock, flaming rock, at these Minotaurs, who are really not happy about their life situation at this point. Going to continue to take some damage. You can see the gyro hits take one down there. Nice Penumbral Pendulum. It's a good chunk out of those Dwarf Warriors. The Thunderers managed to mostly avoid it. But the Rune Lord actually fighting the Bray Shaman. Bray Shaman's actually a decent enough combatant for him. Rune Lord's got slightly better stats, but it is close enough to rely somewhat on RNG. These Brimstone guns getting caught up in the Harpies, so definitely not just free to fire here in this replay. But hopefully once the spawn wear off, those Thunderers can get back online, shut these Harpies down, and allow the Brimstone guns to come in the late game, maybe get some nice bombing runs perhaps on these Ungor Raiders. Very least, they're using up their main gun ammunition, definitely against these Minotaurs, who are surprisingly still online. It's one group of Minotaurs here. The main reason I like the missile block chance, or the shields, is for the missile block chance, right? Additional armor and melee defense is also good as well, but they do lose a little bit of anti-infantry in the case of the dual-hand weapon variant. 18 bonus for infantry, definitely it's quite helpful, but in my opinion, it's just better for the Minotaurs to stay alive in the first place. Here we go. Again, you can see the Harpies being screened by the ground fire of the Thunderers, allowing the Brimstone guns to operate a little bit more freely. We've got this unit back, actually shooting some Brimstone guns themselves at the Harpies, trying to get rid of them. So at this point, a lot of the Beastmen support units starting to fall apart a little bit. We've still got some Bestigor, some Minotaurs over here, forming a nice armor-piercing presence. So it's not all fun and games for the Dwarfs. You can see the Harpies once again managed to engage both of these units of gyros at the same time. Quite impressive stuff. They're going to skedaddle on out of there, try and get back to the supporting ground fire of the Thunderers once again. You can see Morgar's a little caught up in some infantry here. Speaking of infantry, the Beastmen don't have much left. They've got a few Bestigor coming back, but are able to rout some Miners with charges there with those Ungor Raiders. And yeah, last unit of Harpies Nice long-range fire of the Thunder is able to see them off, and now the Brimstone guns are basically free. The caster also being routed. This is one use for gyros as well, specifically for Dwarfs, because it's really your only mobile unit whatsoever. You can use them to chase off, in particular, high-value units like this caster. I don't know if he's necessarily super high gold value, but certainly in terms of tactical value, you definitely want to get rid of him and his spells, and has a lot of damage potential for his cost. So definitely good to get rid of him. Speaking of that, a couple of these Ungor Spearman herds are fully gotten rid of, shattering as they run, and at this point, things are looking pretty grim for the Beastmen. I mean, they don't really have any way of stopping out the gyros. They have a few Harpies come back here, try and rout those Thunders, but actually get routed themselves. And okay, here we go. Oh, I thought we were going to get a nice point-blank bombing run. Instead, the gyros just unloading with their Brimstones. Maybe a little bombing run? No, come on. Maybe not. It's all good. Honestly, don't even really need to use their bombs at this point. The Dwarfs are far enough ahead that, I mean, just this presence of Thunders by themselves will probably be enough. Morgar also gets Rune of Wrath and Ruin, so he's just absolutely shuffling super slow over here. Armor-piercing damage is pretty good against armored infantry as well, given that, I mean, total HP damage is 115, right? Yeah, more or less on over 10 seconds, and almost exactly 10-second reload time, so yeah, 115 damage. With the 15 bonus versus large added in, definitely quite nice, but even just as it is, it's over 100 damage in terms of missile strength. We'll have to look, but 85, I think, is enough armor-piercing damage to kill quite a few infantry models. I think maybe there's a handful that are above that, like Black Orcs, I know, have more HP than that, so they would take a couple shots, but still enough missile damage that it's going to bleed away models for a lot of units, and even against cavalry as well, depending on how armored the cavalry is. One shot may or may not actually just kill a unit model outright. So Brimstone guns definitely good at anti-large. You know, they're not necessarily great against monsters, just because the actual total DPS really isn't amazing for the cost. Much better against multi-model units like cavalry, again, infantry, monstrous infantry as well. Definitely get some pretty solid work on. Their missiles, I would need to check. I don't remember 100%. I probably should have checked before this whether their missiles actually count as artillery or small arms, quote-unquote, in which case it could be blocked. I don't think that the Brimstone guns can actually be blocked by missile block chance, but I'm not 100% on that. Someone might want to check me on that and let us know down in the comments below, but I'm 99% sure you can't block those missiles. You can resist them. With Morgar's missile resistance will help him somewhat here, but that is counteracted, again, by the fire weakness, so he's resisting only 50% of the damage rather than the full 75%, because, again, they count as flaming damage, which is nice in certain situations as well. I mean, it's not anything super to write home about. Dwarfs don't have a lot of ways to give weakness to fire. They do have a couple ways to give weakness to fire, which we'll talk a little bit about that, but Morgar is going to get absolutely dragged down in the mud here. Eventually, the Brimstone guns do recuperate quite a bit of value shooting him. He's going to go down versus the Rune Lord. Might actually beat the Rune Lord, which is kind of hilarious, but eventually the gyros do him in, so very well played to both. Big thanks to Wei for sending that one in. And yeah, the Brimstone guns all don't quite pay for themselves, but pretty close. I mean, one of them definitely pays for itself, but more or less, I mean, they have almost all their unit models still online, so that's good stuff there. The Thunderers likewise also contribute well, so these two kind of ranged lines, the air ranged line and the ground ranged line, working quite well in tandem. And this one Thunder in particular, 1800 damage value, very solid stuff. Dwarf Warriors and Longbeards holding the line admirably, along with the Miners with Charges, who actually get some pretty decent value. 824 damage value on Miners with Charges is good stuff. For Saltier Than You, yeah, for me, I would probably take shields on the Minotaurs. That would help them a little bit against all this ranged Overwatch, but the one definitely paid for itself, which is nice to see. Harpy's also doing a pretty decent job as well. Ungor Raiders, very good in this matchup, and basically every other matchup, even though they don't have great AP, they're just nice ranged pressure. Yeah, best score almost paying for themselves. Not quite, but anyway. So yeah, Dwarves, again, you've got the kind of anti-infantry, anti-large dichotomy, and there is a few ways to give weakness to fire to take advantage of the flaming damage. of the Brimstone guns. So if we take a look over here, starting with the Thane, you've got an item which gives a constant weakness to fire in an area of effect. 22% weakness to fire in a big AoE might not seem like a lot, but that is a pretty considerable amount. And, you know, there's more than just the Brimstone guns that do fire damage. Like, blasting charges also deal fire damage. So, like, YOLOing a Thane forward with that item, then throw a bunch of charges into a unit of infantry. You could get some pretty good value that way. Again, shooting in with the Brimstone gun's main gun. Obviously, Flame Cannon and Iron Rakes also deal fire damage. There's a few different ways, and there's one other that a lot of people forget about, but it is a unit that you would almost always take anyway. Dragonback Slayer is one of the best infantry units overall in the game. They have 25 damage resistance baseline because of this physical plus magic resistance, and, I mean, just insanely good stats, anti-large, everything else, but they have this bound contact effect here, where they give flammable on their melee attacks, which gives minus 36% speed and plus 22% weakness to fire for 10 seconds on melee attacks. So that speed reduction is the main thing most people talk about, but an additional weakness to fire, again, only 22%, might not seem like a lot, but it is pretty significant. I mean, Kindle Flame is, what, 25%, something like that, so you can actually, this isn't something you see done super often, but you can actually stack Thane, with the Dragonback Slayers. If you bring both of his items, you get like a minus 50% speed something between the two effects, and minus or plus 44% weakness to fire, which is pretty considerable. That might make a pretty noticeable difference, especially on something like a Brimstone guns, which you know, have high individual missile damage, but kind of not a ton of ammunition considering what they do for you. In terms of other, you know, directly comparable units, the most comparable in terms of flying armor piercing is deck droppers with guns. Again, it's not a perfect comparison because of the difference in model count, the fact that the gyros have the ability to drop bombs as well. But 700 versus 800, the guns have a decent amount longer range, but not that much more than what I was thinking. Gyros, Brimstone gun's 100 range. I want to say that is, yeah, it's longer than the basic. Steam gun gyros 75 range, so that's quite nice. Yeah, 38 missile damage over 10 seconds, 31 and 13 base, considering they have 18 unit models, right? So they literally have 6 times the unit models. I mean, the Brimstone guns individually do about 3 times the damage, so overall, it looks like deck droppers have a slightly higher damage output. But keep in mind that does not factor in the anti-large. Anti-large probably gives that slightly in favor of the gyro Brimstone guns. Hard to say. I'm not the best at math, so you guys are probably mocking me in the comments down below, in which case I should just stop recording. So thank you all so much for watching. It's been an absolute pleasure. If you like this sort of content, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification. Every time I upload a new video, you'll be notified. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.